Good morning, boys and girls. I just want to let you know that baby Susan slept very well last night, knowing that Jack is back with the Ingalls family. That was some good news we heard yesterday, that Jack found the Ingalls. Even though they thought he had passed away, he found them. And luckily, it was not a wolf. It was Jack that was sneaking up on them in the night. So our last chapter ended very, very well. Now, today we're going to read chapter 4. It's called Prairie Day. It starts on page 38 in Little House on the Prairie by Laura Ingalls Wilder. Soft wickerings were close to Laura's ear, and grain rattled into the feed box. Pa was giving Pet and Patty their breakfasts. "Back, Pet! Don't be greedy," he said. "You know it's Patty's turn." Pet stamped her foot and nickered. "Now, Patty, keep your own end of the box," said Pa. "This is for Pet." Then a little squeal from Patty. "Ha! Got nipped, didn't you?" Pa said. "And serves you right. I told you to eat your own corn." Mary and Laura looked at each other and laughed. They could smell bacon and coffee and hear pancakes sizzling, and they scrambled out of bed. Mary could dress herself, all but the middle button. Laura buttoned that one for her. Then Mary buttoned Laura all the way up the back. They washed their hands and faces in the tin wash basin on the wagon step. Ma combed every snarl out of their hair, while Pa brought fresh water from the creek. Then they sat on the clean grass and ate pancakes and bacon and molasses from the tin plates in their laps. All around them, shadows were moving over the waving grasses, while the sun rose. Meadow larks were springing straight up from the billows of grass into the high, clear sky, singing as they went. Small pearly clouds drifted in the immense blueness overhead. In all the weed tops, tiny birds were swinging and singing in tiny voices. Pa said they were dickcissels. "Dickie, Dickie," Laura called back to them. "Dickie bird." "Eat your breakfast, Laura," Ma said. "You must mind your manners, even if you are 100 miles from anywhere." Pa said mildly, "It's only 40 miles to Independence, Caroline, and no doubt there's a neighbor or so nearer than that." "40 miles, then," Ma agreed. "But whether or no, it isn't good manners to sing at table. Or when you're eating," she added, because there was no table. So that tells us that the Ingalls are 40 miles away from the nearest town. So they are somewhere, remember, down here in Kansas, and they are 40 miles away from the nearest town. 40 miles would be like going to Casson, Minnesota, if you've ever been there. You go through Rochester and Byron, the next town on Highway 14 is Casson. So they're quite a ways away from any towns. In Plainview, we are in a town, but the nearest town is only about 5 miles away. So we're much closer to a town than they are. There was only the enormous empty prairie, with grasses blowing in waves of light and shadow across it, and the great blue sky above, and birds flying up from it and singing with joy because the sun was rising. And on the whole enormous prairie was no sign that any other human being had ever been there. Wow, can you imagine, boys and girls? No signs that any other human beings had ever been to where they are. In all that space of land and sky stood the lonely, small, covered wagon, and close to it sat Pa and Ma and Laura and Mary and baby Carrie eating their breakfasts. The mustangs munched their corn, and Jack sat still, trying hard not to beg. Laura was not allowed to feed him while she ate, but she saved bits for him. and Ma made a big pancake for him of the last of the batter. Rabbits were everywhere in the grass, and thousands of prairie chickens, but Jack could not hunt his breakfast that day. Pa was going hunting, and Jack must guard the camp. First, Pa put Pet and Patty on their picket lines. Remember, that's kind of like their tie-outs. Then he took the wooden tub from the side of the wagon and filled it with water from the creek. Ma was going to do the washing. Then Pa stuck his sharp hatchet in his belt. Now, a hatchet, I think we might have talked about this before, but it's a small axe that you can carry around with you. He hung his powder horn beside his hatchet. Remember, the powder horn is a cow's horn that Pa fills with gunpowder. He put the patch box, remember the patch box, boys and girls? That's what he pushes the bullets down into his gun with. And the bullet pouch in his pocket. And he took his gun on his arm. He said to Ma, "Take your time, Caroline. We won't move the wagon till we want to. We've got all the time there is." He went away. For a little while they could see the upper part of him above the tall grasses, going away and growing smaller. Then he went out of sight, and the prairie was empty. Mary and Laura washed the dishes while Ma made the beds in the wagon. They put the clean dishes neatly in their box. They picked up every scattered twig and put it in the fire. They stacked the wood against a wagon wheel. Then everything about the camp was tidy. Ma brought the wooden pannikin of soap from the wagon. She kilted up her skirts and rolled up her sleeves, and she knelt by the tub on the grass. She washed sheets and pillowcases and white underthings. She washed dresses and shirts, and she rinsed them in clear water and spread them on the grass to dry in the sun. Here's a picture of Mary and Laura washing the dishes from the tub that Pa filled with water from the creek. Mary and Laura were exploring. They must not go far from the wagon, but it was fun to run through the tall grass in the sunshine and wind. Huge rabbits bounded away before them. Birds fluttered up and settled again. The tiny dicky birds were everywhere, and their tiny nests were in the tall weeds. And everywhere there were little brown striped gophers. The little creatures looked soft as velvet. They had bright round eyes and crinkling noses, and wee paws. They popped out of holes in the ground and stood up to look at Mary and Laura. Their hind legs folded under their haunches. Their little paws folded tight to their chests, and they looked exactly like little bits of dead wood sticking out of the ground. Only their bright eyes glittered. Mary and Laura wanted to catch one to take to Ma. Again and again they almost had one. The gophers would stand perfectly still until you were sure you had him this time. Then just as you touched him, he wasn't there. There was only his round hole in the ground. Here's a picture of Mary looking into the holes, and here's Laura over here trying to run and catch the gophers. Laura ran and couldn't catch one. Mary sat perfectly still beside a hole, waiting for one to come up. And just beyond her reach, gophers scampered merrily, and gophers sat up and looked at her. But not one ever came out of that hole. And if you look behind Mary, look at all the gophers coming up behind her. They're very smart and quick little critters. Once a shadow floated across the grass, and every gopher vanished. A hawk was sailing overhead. It was so close that Laura saw its cruel round eye turned downward at her. She saw its sharp beak and its savage claws curled, ready to pounce. But the hawk saw nothing but Laura and Mary and round empty holes in the ground. It sailed away. looking somewhere else for its dinner. Then all the little gophers came up again. It was nearly noon then. The sun was almost overhead. See, back in these days, boys and girls, when they didn't have watches, they used the sun to tell time. And if you ever look up at the sky, you can tell it's noon because the sun will be directly above you. So you can actually use the sun to tell time, just like the Ingalls did. So Laura and Mary picked flowers from the weeds, and they took the flowers to Ma instead of a gopher. Ma was folding dry clothes. The little panties and petticoats were whiter than snow, warm from the sun and smelling like the grass. Ma laid them in the wagon and took the flowers. She admired equally the flowers that Laura gave her and the flowers that Mary gave her, and she put them together in a tin cup full of water. She set them on the wagon step to make the camp pretty. Remember, Ma likes to have everything pretty. Remember when we read Little House in the Big Woods, boys and girls? When Ma made butter, she put it in a mold to make it look like strawberries because she wanted the butter to look pretty. Then she split 2 cold corn cakes and spread them with molasses. She gave one to Mary and one to Laura. That was their dinner, and it was very good. "Where is a papoose, Ma?" Laura asked. "Don't speak with your mouth full, Laura," said Ma. So Laura chewed and swallowed, and she said, "I want to see a papoose." "Mercy on us," Ma said. "Whatever makes you want to see Indians? We will see enough of them, more than we want to, I wouldn't wonder." "They wouldn't hurt us, would they?" Mary asked. Mary was always good. She never spoke with her mouth full. "No," Ma said. "Don't get such an idea into your head." "Why don't you like Indians, Ma?" Laura asked, and she caught a drip of molasses with her tongue. "I just don't like them. And don't lick your fingers, Laura," said Ma. "This is Indian country, isn't it?" Laura said. "What did we come to their country for if you don't like them?" Ma said she didn't know whether this was Indian country or not. She didn't know where the Kansas line was. But whether or no, the Indians would not be here long. Pa had a word from a man in Washington that the Indian Territory would be open to settlement soon. It might already be open to settlement. They could not know, because Washington was so far away. So what they mean is, boys and girls, remember the Ingalls are somewhere here in Kansas now. And Ma doesn't quite know where the Kansas line is. And by the Kansas line, she doesn't quite know where the border or the line that separates Kansas from Missouri and Nebraska is. So they're somewhere in Kansas. But what Ma is telling Laura and Mary is when she says the Indians won't be there long is that she means that settlers, people will start moving from the east. They'll come from this direction. And what will happen is the government in Washington will make the Indians move further and further west because they'll want this land so people can live there from the east. Then Ma took the sad iron out of the wagon and heated it by the fire. She sprinkled a dress for Mary and a dress for Laura and a little dress for baby Carrie, and her own sprigged calico. She spread a blanket on the sheet and on the wagon seat, and she ironed the dresses. Now here's a picture, boys and girls, of the iron that Ma used. As you can see, it's a little bit kind of shaped like an iron that your mom and dad used to iron your clothes. But this iron, it was just made out of metal or iron or steel. There was no plug-in. So what Ma did is she took this and stuck this bottom part into the fire to get it hot. See, nowadays you plug irons in it and then they get hot by using electricity. And what Ma did so she didn't burn herself is this part right here separated. So when she took it out of the fire, she stuck this handle into these 2 little holes, and then she was able to iron without burning her hands. we're going to stop right here because we're running out of time.